And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're like, okay, I'm doing this creator owned book and I'm making $0, and that's fine. Or I'm making negative X number of dollars, and maybe that's less fine. But I don't want to pay an artist below their rate to do a thing. In those cases, it becomes a bit more important sadly, for the Hollywood stuff to kind of hit a little bit. Like Newburn was my detective book, and we did okay on it, but I was spending a lot of money on the back part of the book, hiring newer creators to tell their stories, because I want a platform for people to like, hey, welcome to comics. Like, here's some money, and like you own it, and go do it. Which meant I made $0 on the comic, like myself, but everyone else was paid.
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, where we talk to the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry, the people who kind of keep the wheels on the tracks, and they are the ones that make our comics industry a wonderfully flawed place that it is. Nobody embodies wonderfully flawed more than this week's guest. He is a writer of the biggest comics on the market, and in some books that he insists on doing everything himself because he's a control freak. He is genuinely one of my favorite new friends. Don't tell him that, because we have started working together on a new project that we're going to talk about later in this episode. Actually, let's start it off with Zdarsky Comics news. Let's just get it right out there in the front. Anyway, friends and neighbors, Chip Zdarsky, not Tom Green. This is not Tom Green on your screen. I know he looks like it, and all Canadians kind of look alike. So that's
the older myself and Tom Green get, the more we look alike, which is upsetting, I think, for both of us.
I think so too. Although he does lean into the Canadian accent, and you seem to be trying to pass as a
is that what I'm doing?
As somebody from the Freedom Nation.
Yeah, exactly. Tom Green's even moved closer to me because he lives in Ontario now. He bought a farm.
Yes,
just a few hours drive here. So
I saw that there was some sort of documentary about that. That's yeah, very good. Well, thank you for doing this. I know that you and I have been we've been working together for a little while, and I know we tried a couple times to schedule this, but it turns out we're both busy.
We're both comic book moguls. That's the problem.
Moguls. That's good. I like that. I'm putting that on a business card. I wanted to start this kind of off with just telling a story about why I think it's why you and I kind of got together. And then I wanted to go back into the research and get to know a little bit about our boy Chip. So about, I would say, the end of last year, probably the beginning of the last quarter last year, I started having these meetings with different people, and everybody was talking about, what's wrong with comics, right? We all have this theory of what's wrong with comics. And each time we would eventually get to somebody saying, what we need is Wizard Magazine. We haven't had Wizard Magazine in forever, and it sold a bunch of comics, and it was just for fans, and it wasn't all this industry bullshit, which is all the websites are now, and frankly, this podcast.
You're part of the problem.
I am part of the problem right now, but we need it. We need it. Where is it? And I said, the first couple of times, I'm like, yeah, good luck, man. You need like $5 million and somebody who's obsessed with getting that out.
Yeah,
and then after a while, after the third or fourth time this came up, I said, who would be good at this? If you can get him, it's Chip Zdarsky. He's already doing the ZCN thing, and you just make that bigger, and it will. I mean, that is the answer. It just sells comics. It does it with a voice, and it does. It does focus probably too much on his own stuff, but it does
less and less with every issue as I run out of stuff to promote.
That's true. Anyway, so that New York Comic Con just this last year, we were. I was sitting down with some friends, and one of them called you over. You and I had never met, as far as I know.
We'd met once. We met at a raid event to do with Fan Expo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. I guess I'm more memorable than you are.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway,
I was like, I never want to speak to this guy again. Mental note. Get out of this bar.
Anyway, now that you mentioned, I do remember that event. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. But we were meeting. I thought for me for the first time, and I told you that story that I just said now, and you said that you loved this thing so much that you just needed a little bit of help.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here we are, right?
Yeah.
So far, complete failure.
How are you going to maintain being a mogul if you keep signing up for complete failures?
It's you got to get the failures out of the way. You learn each time. That's the key,
true.
right? Is you have
That's
to
true.
make mistakes faster.
Yeah.
So let's actually dig into that, like,
Yeah.
because I do want to go back and learn more about you and do my best to avoid asking you about the motivations of Daredevil. But
Money, baby, money.
tell me about I just love that there should be a story about Matt Murdock going, fuck, man, my law practice has really suffered. We got to get out there and get some of these class action suits going. Anyway, sorry. What? Tell me about how this came about, how ZCN came about, and what motivated you to keep it going after the initial gag. I think was probably maybe even felt a little played, right?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely hit a point maybe about a year ago where I was done with social media. Like I just couldn't take it anymore. And also just the feeling that like even just by being on it, you're kind of complicit in something that's wrecking the world. Even when you see people kind of on your side politically or whatever, you're just like, oh no, you're also part of the problem. Like you're feeding this thing, this algorithm, and like the people in charge of these platforms want you to be angry. It doesn't matter which side. They just want that kind of engagement, which causes more division. Anyways, it's this whole thing. And in the meantime, a lot of us are on there trying to market ourselves, and it felt like an anti-marketing tool at some point. Because I'll say this: there are comic creators on Twitter that I won't work with because of what they say and do on Twitter.
Damn.
Like straight up. Like I'm like, oh, you're an asshole. Oh, you're a moron. Oh, you spend too much time on here. You're not going to get your pages done.
Yeah.
Like all these things that they think are helping their career are secretly harming their career. Because if I have a choice between somebody who does good work who's not on Twitter and someone who does good work who is on Twitter and is being an asshole, I'm going to lean towards the person who is on Twitter. And it can work for you, obviously. Like, there are some people who are quite good at it, but like few and far between. So just seeing what a mess it was online, I retreated just to the point where I do my newsletter like once a week, and that kind of felt like a nice way to engage with people. But I just started thinking like, well, how did I find out about comics before the internet? And really, a lot of my youth was in comic shops, flipping through and purchasing like Marvel Age and Wizard and Comic Buyer's Guide, Amazing Heroes, Comic Interview. Like, there's so many publications that were kind of about comics. And Wizard is probably the closest thing, because you mentioned it before, that people have fond memories of in terms of like boosting the industry. And it was fun. It was a fun read. Like even when I was kind of maybe past the age of Wizard, if there's such a thing, I was still flipping through, like interested in the interviews and interested in like what was coming up. And yeah. So ZCN was basically me being like, I like doing a newsletter, so why don't I do a physical one and get it into comic shops, because that's where people are, right?
Right.
And it changed a bit from my initial idea. My initial idea was I was only kind of talking about books that were about to FOC. Because I thought, okay, when you're in the shop and you're flipping through this, and you see the book, you can turn around to your retailer and go, hey, I'd like to order this. But I found the time gap was too much. Like when I talked to other creators about like, hey, would you have a title FOCing on this date or whatever? And they'd be like, I don't know. Like they would only find out like a week before when the FOC was, and they wouldn't have the information. So it shifted more to like what's on sale that week or what's on sale the week after. But anyway, so yeah, the first one was kind of a joke, but just to see what I could do, where I just printed 50,000 of these and kind of dropped them on comic shops as a surprise. And it was just a 4-page thing, and it was all about me, because that's the joke, right? Zdarsky Comic News, like. But then I knew issue 2, I was going to have Ryan Stegman in there because we have a fun rivalry. And then, I just realized, oh, I actually really like this part. I like interviewing my friends and creators even that I don't know. reading their books and kind of learning. Part of this is
Yeah.
about me learning. So it definitely hit a point where there was like an issue where once I sent it off to press, I realized I hadn't promoted anything of mine in it. Like I totally lost the plot. Like this is supposed to be about me, and I didn't have a single book pick that was of mine. But that's fine. Like I enjoy doing it so much because my background is newspapers and magazines, so it was like it felt like a real
Yeah.
natural kind of thing for me.
Man, there's just so much I want to double tap into there. But you
Yeah.
talking about needing, how much you enjoyed reading Wizard, and I still, whenever I find a copy, I still have to sit and kind of look at it. Now, professionally, I want to go in and steal stuff, right?
Yeah.
I want us to be able to start creating some of those features. But when I think back on it, they really did have social media engagement in those magazines, and they
Yeah.
were in the form of letters columns.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was legitimately what the same drug we get from scrolling, which is seeing people like interact, was already there.
Yeah.
We didn't need social media for that. I think
Yeah,
that's really
it's just
interesting.
curated, which is I think
Yeah.
highly important. So you don't run a letter that says I want to cut your head off, which, as I told you in my presentation at Comics Pro, is an actual message I got on Twitter at one point.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the curation is so key. Human curation is so key.
Right.
Because yeah, that algorithm just does not care.
It doesn't care. And you know what? We all curate what we say, right? We think through what we're going to say. We decide. I mean, whoever it is decided to cut your head off. I mean, there was some sort of filtering process that got them to that, or maybe there wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Who
oh,
knows
I
where
don't
they
want to go
started.
too far. I don't want to say I'm going to murder this guy. But if I just cut his head off,
I could keep it alive. We could like
cryogenics.
one of those jars. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally fine.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, well, let's definitely a couple things I want to dig back into of what you just said. But I can say I'm having, of the several different projects, being a comics mogul that I am, of the several different projects that we're working on, this is legitimately one of my favorites because it does
awesome.
Not only is it creatively interesting, and you've done a wonderful job of allowing us to have some input on that, but also it's business wise, it's allowed us to tinker and really create something special. And I'm incredibly looking forward to hearing, like, seeing how people respond to the stuff we have planned for the later in the year.
Yeah, I mean the response so far has been great. Like all my creator fans have reached out to me wanting to be a part of it. Comic companies have reached out to be a part of it. Like and meeting all the retailers with you at Comics Pro this past week was awesome. It was like I was surprised at how much I enjoyed that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you got a piece of that, and I do have that in my notes. But before we dig into that, I want to go way back, and I want to discuss a little Canadian boy from, is it Barrie, Ontario?
Oh wow, pulling up the Wikipedia and everything. You're really
That's
doing
right,
your
baby.
research. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
My hometown is
Mr.
Barrie,
Steve Murray.
Ontario. Oh my God, shock.
I'm sorry. Did I say that word out loud? Those words out loud? So tell me about young Steve, and how does he get so involved? I mean, deeply involved in comics. Like, where does that begin?
Smallest kid in my class, bullied, shy, all of that.
Yeah.
Turned into a bit of a class clown as a result. And yeah, I mean, comics for me were weirdly, they kind of worked hand in hand with soap operas. Like as a kid, I was addicted to soap operas.
Really?
To the point where I would go to there's a local soap or a local signing from a soap opera star, and when I was there, I was 13. I'm just I was the only kid there, and I was mercilessly mocked.
No kidding.
From the stage.
And reasonably so. This 13-year-old obsessed with soap opera. What were your favorites? Did you?
Oh man, so there was General Hospital. That was my key one because there's a lot of spy stuff in that.
Oh yeah,
which I quite dug. Another World, which came on before that. Sometimes I dip into Days of Our Lives. In the evenings would be Dallas. It'd be Dynasty. The big ones.
Yeah.
If I could stay up late enough for Falcon Crest, I would. Yeah, no, I was addicted to them, and there's something about the serialized storytelling.
Yeah.
That was a big draw between soap operas and comic books. Like the fact that these were stories that existed before you get into them, and stories that kept going month to month.
Right.
Was fascinating, and I loved it, and you really become invested. So I think that That's kind of what got me into comics, weirdly, or got me into soap operas, or kind of both at the same time.
It's
And
interesting is that those two things really, I never really thought about them that way, but soap operas being that sort of episodic storytelling that is just unrelenting.
yeah, and
Right?
also there's that thing of, the joke with soap operas is, oh, here's the character Carly, whatever. She ended up dying and coming back, and she's got an evil twin, and she ended up turning bad herself, and then murdered somebody by accident and covered it up and went to prison, but got out and started a law firm. Like, so many things happen to those characters in soap operas that it
Yeah.
seems ludicrous. And comics is that times 10.
Yeah. That's
Like
true.
like every character in comics has done just like an insane amount of stuff, but they still have to exist as characters. Yeah. So there's a lot of connection there, I think, between soap operas and comic books. So that was a lot of my childhood, was, the indoor kid who
Yeah.
taped on his VCR General Hospital, so he didn't miss it on his way home from school.
I
And
absolutely love that about
hitting
you.
the comic shop. Yeah, I love the comic shop.
I mean, the secret origin thing is a little played out, but do you have is there anything about your initial interests in comics that is still in your DNA as a storyteller, do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm trying to think, because like the first comic I bought and I was like, whoa, this is a thing, was Marvel Superhero Secret Wars issue number 7. And it had everything in it. It was just like every bad guy and good guy, and there was, again, very soap opera, because there was a lot of, romance and kissing and fighting. Like, there was so much going on there, um, that I think, I always want to put everything into a comic. But the one comic that kind of really held on to me came a bit later, and kind of was a template for me, which was Justice League International. All the Giffen DeMatteis, Kevin McGuire,
Mm-hmm.
Adam Hughes, all those issues. For me, that was like peak superhero comics.
Oh,
And
those are so good. Those covers, God, those Kevin McGuire covers are just timeless.
yeah, I was tracing everything from those books. It was
Yeah.
very surreal to work with Kevin years later. But yeah, those were comics that had so much humor and heart, but then when they went serious, it really
Mm-hmm.
hit, because of the lighthearted nature. And I think
Yeah.
that the thing I took from that was, oh, it's that contrast.
Mm.
Like being able to kind of have something kind of fun and ludicrous, and then something really serious and gritty. Like, it kind of
That is,
enhances
yeah.
both of those things. Yeah, that's kind of the one that really stuck with me. And doing Daredevil, like, and the Senti John Romita Jr. was like, I think maybe one of the best comic runs of all time, just because they were trying so many different things, and I kind of aspired to that. I don't think I'm at that stage yet, but like, yeah, those are the best.
Tell me about what kind of family did you grow up in, as this tiny kid obsessed with soap operas?
Well, I mean, I had very supportive parents, which is, I think, key. Um, they loved the fact that I was reading, even if it was
Yeah.
comics, even if it was just comics. They were so happy I was reading. Super supportive. I had a younger brother where, and maybe the ultimate dickish move. I was like a Marvel kid, but I still wanted the DC books, so I convinced him to purchase the DC books so I could read them. I'm like, yeah, I'll be a Marvel guy, you'll be a DC guy. Won't that be fun? And then, when Comic Buyer's Guide or the Overstreet Price Guide, when I was flipping through that and seeing the value of comics,
Yeah.
I showed my brother and I said, I should probably look after your comics just to make sure they retain their value. So I convinced him to buy all the comics I wanted to read, and then I just kept them in my room so I could access them at any time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
As an
real smart.
archivist, truly, you're
As
trying to
an
keep them
archivist.
safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Now,
it's very surreal for him now, kind of seeing me working for these companies,
I'm sure.
because he was a reader as much as I was as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in comics who kind of have that dynamic. I know Jim Zub, his brother, was like a big comics nerd, so I think that's a dynamic there that is the same. Like, just like,
Does he feel
holy
lucky?
shit, my brother is like.
Does he feel lucky that he escaped the life, or is he like, there's a little bit of regret? Like, if I had just been the Marvel kid instead of the DC kid, maybe I would have a silly name that I was going by now.
I don't
Yeah.
think so. I mean, I have told, because my brother, he's definitely had some writing aspirations. And I said, hey, if you want to be Dave Zdarsky,
Right.
just take the last name. Like that kind of nepo baby stuff, I have no problem with. Like, go for it, man. Whatever gets your foot in the door.
So you study journalism, and
Yeah.
you end up at the National Post, and
Yeah.
so Chip is born. Yeah.
Yeah. Weirdly, it was like I'd never studied journalism. I went to school for illustration.
Oh, okay.
But as part of illustration, they're like, you illustrate for newspapers and magazines. Like that was kind of like the gold standard. You could do kids books and things and ad campaigns, but if
But
you can
let's
get
be
it,
real. If you
if
want
you
to
can get,
actually make a living, yeah.
oh, and also to get in the New Yorker or the Rolling Stone, like
Yeah.
that was kind of like the prestige of the program to
Right.
shoot for those kind of goals. But I was a bit of a news junkie, so I ended up working, at the newspaper. But even before then, I was doing like college newspaper stuff. I was like a production editor for a college newspaper, where I kind of learned most of my kind of computer skills and layout skills, and I ended up doing like a comic strip that called Prison Funnies that was a little, debauched. And so I was already kind of doing some freelance stuff for newspapers, so I figured, I should do this under a pseudonym because I was already kind of upsetting some of my
Right.
editors with doing content between papers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure there was a clear split there. So I came up with the Chip name, not really thinking I'd be using it beyond this little comic strip that ran every week. So when I had working for the papers a bit more full time, making my own comics is just kind of a thing I did on the side, and it's kind of leaned into the Chip Zdarsky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so, talk to me about what does the scene look like? This is up. You're growing up around Toronto at this point, right?
Yeah.
What does the comic scene look like in those days?
I mean, it was super supportive. It still is. Um, yeah, because there's all the alternative guys that you kind of hear the legendary stories of like lunches between Joe Matt and Seth and Chester Brown, and
Yep.
and you pity the poor waitress that served them. Um,
Who got
Dave's
no tip at all because they were so broke all the time.
Dave Sim lurking in the corner being weird. I don't know, like, but there are a ton of comics people in Toronto. So when I moved here, and my local shop was very much a part of that scene, the beguiling.
Yeah.
They were friends with kind of everyone in comics. So as soon as you start making comics, you're just part of the community, which is amazing. And at that point, I graduated from Sheridan with the artist Kagan McLeod, and my high school friend was another illustrator named Ben Shannon, and we were like, we should get a studio together. We should do something. And I knew that like there was a local guy, Cameron Stewart, who was doing like DC comic stuff, and I I approached him on a dating app.
What?
Well, like, I mean, back in the day, so there weren't apps technically. It was like I was recently divorced and I was online dating, and I saw his profile on there, and I'm just like, oh, maybe this could work. And I just messaged him and said who I was, and I like long walks on the beach and starting studios in Toronto.
Yeah.
Would you be interested? And so like the four of us met, and we ended up starting.
Which app was it?
It wasn't an app. It was like a nerve.com.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Which was kind of like a sex positive kind of online magazine.
Right.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Cameron obviously, has fallen from grace.
Yeah.
But he's still part of my history, and like I'm not gonna like be like, oh, I didn't know the guy. So we all met up, and to get a vibe check, we're like, okay, yeah, I think we could all do a studio together, like rent a space and just have the four of us in it. And that ended up being Raid Studios. So we started that in like 2001, 2002, I think. And that configuration only lasted a couple of years before all of us kind of left. Other people were kind of coming in, and Ramon Perez was the guy who kind of came in and took it over fully. And now it's like a 13-person giant studio in downtown Toronto with like a cafe and a gallery in the front. Like it's very surreal to see that, because it was just like four dudes who were just like dicking around essentially and
We
trying
need a
not
place
to.
to work that's not my bedroom. Right.
Yeah, and trying to inspire each other, but also trying to find ways to avoid work. Um, and now it's like a thing. Like Ramon has turned it
Yeah.
into like a giant thing, which is very cool.
Well, Ramon is just, I mean, you want to talk about somebody who's just irritatingly attractive and talented, Ramon Perez.
Disagree on the first, but the years haven't been kind to us.
That's
But
true.
the
Stylistically, the man carries
stylistically,
himself with
it's
flair.
true.
Let's put it that
He
way.
does
How's
carry
that?
himself with flair. Yeah, no, he's awesome, and I'm so glad that he ran with it and built it into this thing. Like it
Yeah.
bears little resemblance to what it started as, in very good ways. Yeah, and again, that's another kind of Toronto comics kind of thing. Like so many people have kind of gone through that studio that are, and some are still there. Like Marcus Toe, I just worked with. Like he's in the Raid studio. I've worked with Ramon. Francis Maniple was a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cool setup. Yeah.
Thank you. I had no idea that you were part of that. I guess I'd never really dug too deep into the history of that studio. In talking about community and in talking about people who are definitely out of favor at the moment, I wanted to come back to something you and I have discussed, which was the power of the Warren Ellis Forum and how it shapes so many of us that work in comics now.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That was so eye-opening. Because again,
I think
that's
the first time I used the name ATOM ! Was on the Warren Ellis Forum. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, 100%. Like so many of us, that was our first introduction to each other. Because and it's kind of that weird cross between Wizard and kind of online stuff. Like, it was the first place. That forum was the first place where you could interact with comic professionals, not at a comic convention.
Yeah.
So you'd see like names that you were reading, like posting on there. You're like, oh my God, like Mark Waid is making a post. Like,
yeah,
very cool. And it was a place where I could just kind of like be a goofball and like post my comics once in a while, and just find people who had the similar interests. It's kind of wild because like on those message boards, like Matt met Kelly Sue on there, got married. I met both of them, which formed my deep friendship with Matt and like mutual admiration of our work. Kieran and Jamie met each other there. So many people met on that forum and are friends to this day. Like it's such a special thing. And even like it's a shame it's all kind of tainted now.
Well,
I mean, obviously that's the least of the problems,
right?
But yeah, like it brought so many people together and like genuine love between human beings, and the guy in charge is happens to be Warren Ellis. So
leaving aside the name, which I guess goes to show be careful in naming things. Talk about why that place in that time. I have my own pet theories, and we've discussed this. Why that place in that time was different than why you react so negatively now to social media, because it was a social media platform. It was just a different structure, right?
Curation. Again, it kind of comes down to that. Like, they were called the Filthy Assistants.
Yeah.
That was the name that was used. But it was women,
moderators,
young women who were the moderators, who were given the power to tolerate no bullshit. Like as soon as you stepped out of line, you were gone. Like you're just gone. Like, well, why deal with that? And there weren't many other places to go online. You could pop up over on like Miller World or like Bendis forums, which I don't really know, their kind of curation. But it really kept that place in line and kept it so it didn't like become too nasty. I mean, there were always moments, but like I think my first interactions with Warren, I ran afoul and I was like suspended for a few days. Like I think I think that was incredibly important. There weren't a lot of places. It was very easy to navigate, and there was curation. It was huge.
Yeah.
And like, again, like so many friendships, and like myself and Matt, like really, really clicked. and like he liked my comics, I liked his comics, and kind of I got to watch him kind of rise through the ranks, doing the independent stuff, and then the Marvel stuff. It was super fun to witness.
This is
And
kind of a model, a model that you followed. Now that I think about it, you did. I mean, I guess he kind of blazed that trail for you. And
yeah, I
now,
mean there were a few people doing that, and I didn't have any desire to do that. Like I was perfectly happy working at the newspaper. I was perfectly happy doing my black and white self-published books. There wasn't like a secret Wolverine story in the back of my head or anything. I just thought it was cool. Like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this guy Ed Brubaker is doing stuff too, and like everyone I knew was just doing really cool things for that company. And I'm like, this is really fun to witness. And like the first time, like we bonded on the Warren Ellis forum, and then we also bonded over our favorite radio program, which was the best show on WFMU, which was a listener-supported New Jersey radio station. And there was like this 3-hour show hosted by Tom Sharpling, which was like extremely funny and weird and just delightful in all ways. And every year they would do like a pledge drive, and a lot of famous people would like kind of contribute things to it.
yeah,
Because it was very much a comedian's comedian kind of setup. And so I forget how it started, but like Matt and I ended up working together for the first time to support that radio station. We did a music video for a Toronto band called Fucked Up, where Matt had the idea and I did all the key drawings, and we had someone else come in and kind of move the drawings and animate it. And it was at that point we realized we could work together. Like, oh yeah, no, this was easy. This was fun and easy.
yeah.
Unlike a lot of kind of collaborations, and that's what paved the way for Sex Criminals.
I do want to get to Sex Criminals, but before we do that, let's talk about your early self-published work.
Yeah.
So specifically, like Prison Funnies, you talked about that being a strip, and then Monster Cops.
Yeah.
What causes you to decide to make that step, and like what are the lessons learned there that you keep you moving, right?
Yeah, a lot of it's just like, oh, I did this. Now what's next? Because Prison Funnies was a strip. It was like a 3-panel gag strip. Like I said, I ran in like a university paper, and at some point I was just like, oh, I have enough of these to collect them.
Right.
And so I put them into a book, and I had 8 pages left over, so I made a full comic story out of those 8 pages, which I'd never done before. I'm like, oh, this is fun. And like my friend Kagan McLeod was doing Infinite Kung Fu. Straight out of Sheridan, and we both worked together at the newspaper as well. So we supported each other in doing like conventions and stuff where we would hand sell our books.
Yeah,
which was great. It was great to do it with a buddy, and yeah. So like after that, I was like, oh, I like doing these full comics. So I would do more kind of Prison Funnies, but do them as like full issues. But it would just take forever. It was like I put out one a year just because I was slow. There wasn't a lot of incentive really because I didn't have deadlines, and I was working. I was an illustrator and I worked at the newspaper. I was doing all sorts of stuff, so it wasn't really pressing.
Did you have any sort of like entrepreneurial people in your background? Because I mean, I can imagine the number of times I've met cartoonists to be like, well, I can't find somebody to syndicate. You know, I can't find somebody to license. You know, but you just decided I have enough of these to make a book. Like, where's that come from?
I mean, it's just like part of it's just like, well, people do this. Like, why? And I'm a people.
I people all the time.
like everything seems. You know, I mean, it's the trick to getting almost anything done. Everything seems really big, but once you break it down into the components and realize there's an order to things, it's not. Like, you know, the first books that I was doing, I was like, oh, okay, I want to I'll have to get in a comic shop. So how do I do that? And you contact the distributor and you talk to them and you fill out these forms. You figure this out. Okay, and I got to print it. How do I do that? Well, you call a bunch of printers. You get quotes. You figure that out. Like, it's all just steps. And once you're underway, it just feels like, oh yeah. People do this.
Thinking back on that time we talked about Warren Ellis, when another one of the kind of forums and voices that came in there was Larry Young, and he was very influential for me. And he did this column. I don't remember where it was originally posted, but I do remember him talking about, look, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You make a deal with a printer, you get 30-day terms. You make a deal with a distributor, you take in orders, you get them printed. Once the money comes in from the distributor, you give that to the printer. You get to keep whatever's left, or you have to pay a little more. Like, it was that kind of thing. I mean, granted, that's not really the flow now, but like, I do remember that very clearly, that there was at least time there were people giving each other context of how to do this on their own.
Yeah. I mean, watching Larry do that was definitely inspiring as well, because he also was the first guy to publish Matt, I think.
Yeah. Wasn't that the annotated Mantooth, if I'm remembering right?
Yeah, Rex Mantooth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was cool. Like, at that point in time, I was just like, oh yeah, this Larry Young guy kind of knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
For me personally, I might have a semi-entrepreneurial spirit.
Mhm.
Mostly it's just like a desire to kind of get things out in the world creatively. But I always have the money to pay first. Like the idea of like, oh, and then the money will come in, and then the credit. Like, I didn't even, like, you and I know, like, we're dealing with the printer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, can I send you the money for this? Like, oh, no. Now that you've been doing it with us, you've got credit. I'm like, I don't want credit.
I want to give you bad money now.
Yeah, like it's upsetting to me to use a credit card anywhere. Like, I just do not like that feeling. Because my 20s were, scrambling to, like, make ends meet, and maybe I'm not making rent this month, and I don't like that feeling at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll hold me back in the long run, because you got to spend money to make money, and money you don't have. But yeah.
Listen, I've known enough people that have gone the other way that I would not be surprised. So almost immediately, though, you guys, I don't, maybe I got this timeline wrong, but is it possible that the Prison Funnies and Monster Cops and then Sex Criminals from Image all came within like a year of each other? Is that right?
No. I mean, there's a fair amount of time.
Okay.
Because Sex Criminals was, like, I guess, say 12 years ago now. So I was doing Prison Funnies and Monster Cops for, like, at least 5 years.
Oh, okay, great. All right.
I'd say, because it was definitely the kind of thing where I'd have an issue, like, once a year, and I'd hit all the conventions and just party and get drunk and just hopefully make enough to, like, cover my costs and
cover your bar tab and your hotel. And yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, that was all just for fun. So, and Sex Criminals was also going to be that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun. I don't mean to say it wasn't fun, but yeah, it was a goofball thing that Matt and I were going to do, that we were assured, and we assured each other, was not going to sell. So it doesn't really matter. We just have fun with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that experience, though, I mean, that book did take off quite a bit, and y'all did some really fun, innovative marketing with it too.
Yeah.
Like the uses of the blind bags, I think, if I look back on it, was one of my favorite uses of that bit.
The whole thing was just, it was surreal, because, like, again, we thought it wasn't going to sell. We were hoping they were going to give us 5 issues so we could have a collection with our names on it and put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
But, like, within that first day, we were like, oh no, this is life-changing. Like, everyone was talking about it. It sold out immediately. Like, we did, like, 6 printings of that first issue, and we would have done more if I hadn't said we can't. Like, I'm running out of things to put on the cover.
Yeah,
and it was wild. Like it completely changed my life and Matt's. Like, all of a sudden we were just, like, in a totally different stratosphere, and having to deal with, like, fans and, like, massive lineups, and we were like, New York Times #1, Time Magazine Comic of the Year. Like, it was just, I can't even stress how weird it was, because I was still working at the newspaper. I worked at the newspaper for, like, a full year after Sex Criminals came out.
What?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
I liked the job.
Yeah,
and it was such a fun job, and you never know if things are gonna fall apart. And you need your full-time job. So yeah, during Sex Criminals, like, we were just, like, getting all these awards, and there's, like, money coming in. I was just like, okay, like, I gotta figure something out, but I don't know what. I ended up taking, like, a 3-month leave from the paper, because reporters tend to do that to write their books, and this was a similar situation. and at the end of it, I was just like, okay, like, I have to make a decision, because I can't have a full-time job and do this.
I was about to say, you were illustrating that book.
Yeah.
How did you manage a full-time job and put out a book like that?
I really half-assed the full-time job. I mean, at that point, I'd convinced him to let me work from home. So I was like,
okay,
I'd work on the job from, like, 6 a.m. to like, I don't know, 3 p.m. or something like that. Then I switched to comics, and I kind of work more into the night and then on the weekends. But it was definitely unsustainable, and I knew it. And it was a hard decision because the newspaper job was the most fun I'd had up until that point.
Right.
Like every day was different. Like you're going around town, like learning about things and doing dumb stunts, and it was a ton of fun. Whereas comics is boring. Like people don't understand that you're actually by yourself in front of a keyboard, just like bang, 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 or just drawing a page and like, okay, with a burst every once in a while of meeting people at a convention.
Yeah.
Whereas newspapers is very social and like there's a lot happening. So it was a hard decision. So within that year, I eventually quit. I think Marvel had. I was starting to do stuff for Marvel at that point, and that's when I realized, oh, okay, like it's beyond just this book. Like I can probably make a career doing it.
Is that Howard the Duck? Is that where you started at Marvel?
Yeah, but the starting was like there was an editor who approached me to do a cover.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I just kind of went above and beyond. Like it was like this dumb cover that I added all these jokes and stuff and all these ideas of how they could do it with variants and that went really well. And then he offered me because he knew I could write because he'd read some of my newspaper stuff and also he bought Monster Cops back in 2002 at a convention. So he's like, oh yeah, I remember that being fun because that was kind of my all ages book.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave me like a 2-page gag strip thing in an anthology to tie into the original Sins event. And I was just like, oh, this is my only chance. So I'm going to put every character in this. So I did 2 pages where it was like 30 characters, just like quick gags for each of them. I wrote it, drew it, colored it, lettered it, submitted it a week before the deadline. Yeah. I think that was also key. Like the fact that I could do it relatively well with minimal edits needed because I'd been writing for the newspaper. I knew how to write concisely and with few errors. Like those things all add up for a career. Like the fact that I could do it all and like I could do it all on time and at least at a certain level of quality. I think the editor was like, oh, okay, like let's see what else we can do with this guy. And we were super lucky that maybe a couple of weeks later, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out and Howard the Duck showed up at the end in a cameo. And so he called me and he's like, I think we can make a comic now. I'm like, is that how that works? Because they didn't know. There was not a lot of communication between publishing and studios at the time. And so they were finding out a lot of stuff at the same time as the public was. And so as soon as Howard the Duck showed up, they were like, that's enough for us to get a green light. So let's start pitching. And that was my first real Marvel gig where I was writing for somebody else, which I'd never done before.
Well, I do want to skip ahead because I know you've had plenty of opportunity, and there's a lot of really great interviews out there with you about some of that work. I do want to just a fan for a moment and say how much I remember. I can't tell you any plot points, but I remember Kaptara really being much fun.
That was great.
But I want to talk about, so you went through a period, let's say 2017 through 2020 or so, or even, I mean, I guess up to pretty much current, where you are working, I mean, primarily it seems as a superhero writer, right? That's, I mean, you're still doing things about, when I talk about public domain and some of your other creator-owned work, but really your like focus seems to be on these superhero books. Yeah. How has that process, I mean, are you obviously you were just talking about some of the background that set you up for that, for kind of being a professional in that way, but is it really, are you just writing I mean, I just realized you're just writing soap operas now. Is that it? You just happen to put capes on them? This 13-year-old Chip Zdarsky is finally getting to write soap opera.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of everything. It's like the novels I read growing up, the movies I watched, like everything influences. Like there's elements of Heat and Daredevil. It's like you can't avoid all your influences. But the superhero comics is the kind of place where you can kind of do all of it. Like I know superhero is like a genre, but like you can do genres within the genre. You can make a romantic comedy superhero thing, and I think the movie side is starting to realize this now. Yeah, you can do a horror superhero thing. And like a espionage kind of take on it. So yeah, it's kind of you can do whatever you want in the superhero genre, which is actually weirdly freeing. So yeah.
Is that a step you are interested in taking? I know that a lot of the stuff that you've written has made it into like TV and movies.
No,
Like,
only
well,
only like this past week.
okay, that's saying a lot. I mean, I just saw a post of you talking about the thing in
Yeah.
Daredevil, so that's got to be surreal.
Oh, very surreal. Yeah.
But does that get you going to maybe step into other media as far as creatively speaking, or are you content with being the germ, the seed?
I like trying everything. Like
Yeah.
that's part of the thing that keeps me going. Is like, oh, I like doing videos, I like writing prose, I like doing comics, I like drawing, I like doing all of it. So there is an interest in the idea of, like, I was saying to a friend the other day, I'm like, I've never been in a writer's room. I'd love to do a writer's room. Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be cool to write a thing and kind of see it come to life on set, or even direct a thing. Like, they're not overriding. It's not like as a child I was like, oh, if I don't write TV, like I will die. It's just more of such a wide general interest in attempting things.
Yeah.
Because you never know. You never know if you'll like it or if you won't like it. I wrote one pilot which was like, it had its good and bad moments, but like it definitely made me more intrigued to try different things. But I love comics because comics is so fast. Like, if I have an idea for the story, like within like 4 or 5 months, like you can get it on stands. Like, you can do these things really quickly if you have the people to support you. Whereas I have so many friends who have done big stints in TV and film, and it's just like, oh, you worked for years on this and it didn't even come out.
Yeah.
Or it came out and it wasn't the thing you wanted because like there are a million other people giving notes on it, and it's watered down and it's kind of shitty and your name's on it. Like, it's hard. It's hard enough being in comics and like maybe having an artist not live up to what you want, or an artist having a writer not live up to what you want. Like, but like, I can't imagine doing a TV show and
having 1,000 people who aren't.
They all have to be on.
Yeah. I can see that. Also, I have a friend of the family who is a screenwriter, and was talking to him. We both work creatively, I guess, and so we just started talking about that process. And I said, well, what have you done? And he said, well, I haven't really got anything produced. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm sorry. He goes, don't be. I'm pretty successful.
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible? You just write screenplays all day long, and you write the same screenplay for years, but you do really well, but you never have seen anything produced. It's crazy to me.
I remember a friend of mine moved to LA to be a screenwriter, and like one of her first encounters with celebrity was like being invited to a Hollywood producer's retirement party, and that producer had nothing made. Like, it was one of those. It was like they did quite fine, had the house with the pool and stuff.
Yeah.
Just made a bunch of pilots and made a bunch of deals, and spent years like trying to get things off the ground, and
just retired from nothing.
That's
crazy.
Yeah,
that's
I
insane.
know. I think that's rare now. I think back in the day when, like, there were all these massive deals and network television. But yeah, like, it's heartbreaking the number of projects that I know about that no one will ever see.
Yeah.
Because at some point an executive was like, no, after years of this, we're not doing it.
It's also interesting I only know this from the comic standpoint. I'm trying to think of if I know of any. I haven't read a whole lot of screenplays of stuff that I've been close to, but I can know there are comic scripts that live in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've produced them in my head, and they will never actually get drawn. They will never get printed. And it's such a strange, like, almost personal feeling to know that is something. I'm a fan of that book that will never exist.
Time to learn to draw.
Yeah. No, thank you.
All right. My number one advice to writers.
Yeah, no, I get that. That totally makes sense. I didn't write these things. I just want that to be clear. I've never actually sat down and written a script myself. Where do you? So I want to talk about your. There was a quote that I got when I was doing the research here, where you said, "Sex criminals pays for my house. Marvel and DC pay for my groceries."
Yeah.
Obviously during that period that Sex Criminals was coming out.
Yeah.
Talk about managing.
It's shifted now.
Okay, good. So
Yeah.
talk about that balance. What is that? I mean, because you had a balance of creator owned and licensed for hire stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you how do you kind of maintain that balance, and how do you think about that? I mean, I know that we've talked to publishers on here who talk about the balance of creator owned versus
Yeah.
IP they own versus licensed books, that kind of thing. But you have a career basically to manage as well that way, and you've obviously not just said no to both, right, or either.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, everything's in waves. Um, I'm a bit more all in right now with Marvel. Like I signed up for a couple of years, and
yeah,
so a lot of my creator run, I'm just kind of like finishing off and kind of like taking a breather from it because it's super hard work. Um, but yeah, there's nothing calculated about it. It's mostly just like, oh, how much do I have on my plate? Can I fit this in? Do I have an idea for it? Which is also
yeah,
key. I think a lot of freelancers, like I'm so fortunate that Sex Criminals was my first thing,
right.
and it hit out of the gate because it gave me the financial kind of bedrock to be able to say no to stuff. So my
Mm-hmm.
early days of Marvel, like I wanted to do Howard the Duck. I was a huge fan, and like I had this idea, and this would be a fun story. And then he started offering me other books, and I would just be like, "Do I have a story good enough for it?" And the answer would be no. So I would say no. Whereas I think most freelancers would say yes right away, and then try and work out their story,
Yeah.
um, because a job's a job, and you got to pay your rent. But because I was actively working on Sex Criminals and we were making money off that book, I could turn down a bunch of stuff at Marvel, and even still I do. Like I'm turning down gigs that I know are going to pay me really really well at those companies. I'm just like, yeah, but yeah, it doesn't feel right, and I just
Yeah.
won't do it. Um, yeah, and like the creator owned is like, whew, the bandwidth. You need bandwidth for that stuff because if it's an image book, the writer is kind of automatically in charge. Like we have to make sure you know people are going to get paid, and you hire this letterer and this artist and a colorer and editor, and you have to deal with the solicitations and stuff like that. Like there's so much to it that like I did a couple things on my own and then realized I just don't have the bandwidth. So when I came up with the idea for Stillwater, which was like this kind of horror book, um, I brought it to Skybound because I'm like, here, I can't be in charge of anything on this except for giving you the scripts.
Yeah.
So and that is a deal where I don't own Stillwater as a result of that. Like that's not a creator-owned book. Image books are not creator-owned book, or Skybound is not
Right.
creator-owned. So there's, you know, the, I probably wouldn't do the same thing again. Like I eventually realized, if I just used my own funds and I hired an editor, which ended up being Allison O'Toole, who you
Mm-hmm.
know and you deal with,
Yeah.
like she handles all my creator-owned stuff as like a salaried employee of Zdarsky Incorporated, which I think was the way to go to be able to kind of maintain that. But even still, like the market is weird, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're like, okay, I'm doing this creator-owned book, I'm making $0, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Or I'm making negative X number of dollars, and maybe that's less fine. But I don't want to pay an artist below their rate to do a thing. And in those cases, it becomes a bit more important sadly, for the Hollywood stuff to kind of hit a little bit.
Right.
Like
It needs
Newburn
to
was
be
my detective book, and like we did okay on it, but I was spending a lot of money on the back part of the book, hiring newer creators to tell their stories, because I want a platform for people to like, hey, welcome to comics. Like, here's some money, and like you own it, and go do it. Which meant I made $0 on the comic, like
right.
myself, but everyone else was paid. But then we sold it to a streamer, and they hired me to do this screenplay, and that check made up for everything else.
Right.
So we could keep doing it until the end. So there's weird calculations that you have to do with creator owned, which makes it tricky.
Well, I think weird calculations that you'd have to do in publishing, right? Because
Yeah,
it's never can come from one source, right? There
no.
is no one source that makes it work because
I mean,
you end up.
sometimes Dan Slott worked at Marvel for like 10 years or whatever, and he wasn't doing creator owned, he was just doing Marvel.
That's
But
true.
like there's something nice about being, again, so all in on a company that takes care of you and you help them, and like
Yeah.
they've had a really good relationship for a long long time. I think he's been there 20 years now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. That's a good point. On the one hand, you want to keep, lots of you don't want to have a single point of failure. On the other hand, it's good to be part of a team,
Yeah.
where people are taking care of each other.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit the cough button here a second. All right. Yeah, I know that we've talked to. Well, I don't know. I guess I've never actually talked to him on here. I'm thinking of a mutual friend of ours who talks a lot about, I do this, not it's not one for them, one for me, but it's like I'm going to build the audience over here so that I can leverage that audience into my creator owned and back and forth, right? And I bring that audience back with me over to the big licensing books and then back,
Yeah, I
So
think that works less and less now. I've seen a few instances of people like going all in on Marvel or DC stuff, and they're like, "This is going to help my creator own," then it doesn't, and you're like, "Oh, okay."
yeah,
Like some audiences are very siloed off.
yeah.
Some properties are very siloed off, so it doesn't automatically mean you're going to get a ton of people following you places.
Let's speaking of creator owns, let's talk about public domain for a little bit.
All right.
Oh, so where's the germ of that come from? And I know that has been a big piece for you. I will tell you that I occasionally I have to bump a public domain ad in order to sell another ad for you, and I'm sorry, deeply
So sad.
sorry about
So
that.
sad.
Yeah. Tell me about that project. How's it come up?
It came about because of another dumb thing I was doing, which was manga splaining, which is my podcast with my friends where they explain manga to me. So we would read manga every week, a new kind of title, and over time, I started to really recognize one of the big differences between the North American English comic market and manga is the North American market is so genre focused. Like almost every pitch is like, yeah, it's like a vampire meets sci-fi, or it's zombies, but they're superheroes. Like we can't seem to get away from that in North America.
Right.
Whereas with manga, sure you have like genre there, but such a wide range of comics about, I don't know, ping pong or golf or
Yeah.
making rice or business
He's a,
deals.
he's a
Like
zombie, but he's a line cook. Yeah.
yeah. Like there's stuff that kind of defies um, our ideas of genre, and and it all seems to stem from what's the creator interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if they're interested in like radio DJs, then they do a comic about radio DJs. And so I stopped to think. I'm like, well, what's my passion? What's the thing that I love? And the sad truth was it was comics. Like that was upsetting. Like all my friends have fun hobbies and interests, and mine is primarily comics. And when I say comics, I mean like researching the history of comics and like old interviews and books about the early days of Marvel or whatever. I love that stuff, and so yeah. Then I realized, oh shit! Like I guess my next creator own is going to be that. Comics about comics.
Let's do it.
But I try to make it like it's not directly about specific comic book historical things. That's just kind of the framework for the family story that is taking place within it. And yeah, it's the book that I'm writing and drawing, so it's very time consuming, and I'm digging into volume 3 right now and cursing myself. And
once again, and you're doing everything in that book, right? Are you?
Yeah. Like part of the reason for that is like it's about kind of ownership over a thing. And so I'm like, you know what? Like this should just be me. Like Allison obviously helps me with the editing, and we have some fun tie-in stuff featuring Rachel Stott and her art. But like, yeah, it's all me because I think it just has to be.
Once again, I find there's this question of bandwidth. Like, is the day job that you're doing shitty now the superhero books? Is that how this works? Are you just phoning it in?
No, no, I'm not. I'm very regimented.
Yeah.
Like I'm up every day and kind of moving about around 5:30.
Yeah.
So I'm at my desk by 6 and I'm writing, and I do it till 5 and I knock off for the day. Like I just don't engage in online stuff really, and that kind of frees me up to just do the work.
I can tell you that I have a personal practice, although this week is all fucked because getting back from Comics Pro. But I do wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock most every day, and I'm usually at my desk trying to get a few things done before everybody wakes up. And I will send you emails knowing, I send emails early in the morning knowing that I'm not going to get anything until noon. And you're right there. Like, okay, I see this guy.
Yeah. like knows like. There's an element too of I was a slacker as a student, as a young person, and I was constantly fucking up in school, except for group projects because I didn't want to let other people down.
Oh yeah.
And so that's a very big element in comics. Like the idea of leaving an artist waiting for a script is so against everything I believe in. As an artist who has waited for scripts, I can tell you that is not a good feeling because
you can't even begin to earn without it, right?
No, exactly. It's your career, and so I'm pretty diligent with deadlines, especially when you're kind of at the beginning of the production chain. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk just a little lighthearted before we dig into your first Comics Pro, which it was fun watching you really take that in. Just from the sidelines. I will say, I didn't get to interact as much as I wanted to, but man, it was fun watching you just almost study it. One of the things that I've loved about the way you handle your content, right? Or the way you talk about where you promote, right, is how interactive, even before ZCN started, how interactive you were with other creators. Like that, I think it's almost a superpower, really, that you are capable of even creating these fictional beefs with people in order to promote them, and they promote you, and back and forth. And I think that's such a wonderful piece that I'd love to see some more of that almost kayfabe happen, just to keep it's entertainment while you're promoting your entertainment.
I'm a very easy punching bag. I come across online, especially, as just basically an idiot. Schlub. So that makes it easier. It's harder now that I'm not on social media because you can kind of generate those friendships a lot easier in those places.
Can you? I do want to say, I want to take a moment to shout out something I saw you do, and I don't think you and I have ever mentioned this, that I deeply loved, because as somebody who studies the marketing and promotion of comics even more than comics themselves, whenever somebody hits something just right and that I didn't think of, it's always that moment of irritation and delight. Why didn't we think of that? And oh man, he hit it so well. I'm remembering, I want to say it was when you started promoting Daredevil, I think it was, and there was some sort of incentive or something for retailers where you were doing those videos for each shop, and they just started degrading over time until you're like, why are we doing this? What is this even? What am I doing? Talk to me. Can we talk about that project for a minute?
Again, it just seemed like a fun idea. I basically posted, I'm just I will do a video for any shop that asks me to do a video. And so I set aside a day where I just recorded one after the other, just boom, boom.
How many were they?
53, I think, total.
Okay.
And it's good to not know how hard a thing is going to be before you do it sometimes, or else you wouldn't do it, right? So you have the dumb idea and you have the energy, and then halfway through it's oh fuck, this is an uphill. There's no way I can do all this.
And
then by the end you're in a rhythm, okay, this is how you cut it, boom, 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 send them out, upload, condense, I know. I'm doing Captain America now for Marvel. I'm oh, what kind of dumb stunt can I do for that? But I'm starting to get old enough and quote unquote wise enough that I can see the problems for each idea a bit too easily now. That's not good. That's not good for creativity.
No, it's really not. No. We don't do these things because they're easy. We do them because we thought they were going to be easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, I think it's you leaned into it in a way that I think the people who won, the retailers who won that particular one, were the ones who got later in the day, because it was just so entertaining to see you just. Okay, here we go.
Just losing it. I know.
Bob's Comics. Go buy this fucking book. Whatever. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I want to go back to the creator beefs because I did take a
Yeah.
digression off my own digression. Do you have any favorite moments of stuff that has come up as a result of that? I mean, we're still doing a lot of it in ZCN, but
Oh, I don't know. I had a nice promotion for um, public domain where I was getting quotes from other creators, and most of the quotes were backhanded, kind of like insult slash compliments, or just not answering me at all. Or it's fun when it plays out that way. But yeah, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. Yeah, there've been a few just like fun back and forth.
yeah,
But Ryan Stegman is definitely like the key player because he's a very online and he loves to shit talk a lot. I think it's the sports guy in him too.
yeah,
Like, oh, this is my team, that's your team. Um, yeah, and having a platform like ZCN where I could just say whatever I want about these guys is also pretty fun.
yeah. It really is, and I think it's a big feature of what we're doing. Also, I love the fact that we're it's a mix of actual actual content that people really want, like I think the feature that came up in the last one we put out, or the one during Comics Pro, was I can't remember the name of the artist, but
Oh,
here are all of
Sanford?
his tools.
Yeah, Sanford Green. Yeah.
Yeah, Sanford Green. Here's all of his tools and all the tools he uses, and here's mine, this shitty MacBook. Yeah.
Yeah. Entertaining and informative.
Exactly.
Yeah. Those are my favorite bits because at the newspaper we would do a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like you're here to inform people.
Yeah.
That explain a thing to them, but if you can make it fun, like, yeah, that's so key.
Definitely. And I think that is part of why this is succeeding as well as it is that you haven't made it just information, and you haven't made it just goofing.
Yeah.
Right? It is that mixture of the two that keeps people coming back, and
Yeah.
I think that works. Well, I would love to hear, you and I have not spoken since we got home a couple days ago from Comics Pro. This is my I don't even know how many. I think I've done all but one of them.
Really?
So,
wow.
I was a retailer when it formed.
Yeah.
When Comics Pro formed out of the Warren Ellis Forum, by the way.
Oh, okay.
When I was a retailer back then and joined in the first year, and definitely went to the first meeting. So I think I've been to all but one. And that was last year. That was the year before, this last one. What so your first impressions, like it's a whole nother kind of event, isn't it?
Yeah. I kind of I don't even know what I expected. I think I expected a comic convention because that's just my only frame of reference, but it's not that. It's so much more intimate. And you're dealing with people we're all in the same boat. We're all just trying to sell comics. We're trying to get comics in people's hands. So everyone's on each other's side.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. And it felt like old school comic convention in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because of the size of it, and because, at one point, I was set up at my table and I'm hand selling. I'm just like, come on over, check out ZCN. I'm explaining it to people. And I haven't done that in a long time because with all the superhero stuff, like you basically show up, you sit down, there's a lineup, you get through the lineup, and you go and have a coffee break, and you come back and there's another lineup, and you just deal with it.
Yeah.
But like when you start out, it's like, hey, pay attention over here, come over to this table, check this out. Like,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and I do like the hand selling aspect of it. And also because it's it's several days and you're seeing the same people over and over again, whereas at conventions usually just like you kind of, oh yeah, I saw him for a second, and that was it. You actually start to get to know people, retailers and other publishers and distributors. Yeah, very intimate, very very nice, and they feed you.
Yeah, I know.
which is also lovely.
And the food wasn't too bad this year. Actually, it was that hotel was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're also like the conversations are just a little bit different. Like if you're in a room and it's just fans, and you get questions from fans, they're always like, when will Jason Todd kiss Batman or whatever, right? You're just like, oh, keep reading, and you just kind of like have to deal with it. But with here, it's like, how can we help you? How can you help us? Like, how do we get this into the hands of the people that we want to get it into? So yeah, very supportive. I quite liked it.
Just as context, I'm realizing introducing this, there could be people who here watching who don't or who weren't there.
Yeah.
So Comics Pro is an annual event that's put on by Comics Pro, the trade organization for comic book retailers. We all gather together, usually in February, in different parts of the country, the country, by the way.
Yes, of course,
And
of course.
and you know, it usually stays in one place for a couple of years and then moves. This year it was in Glendale, California. It's about, generally speaking, it ends up being about half retailers and half like industry people, publishing, distribution, printing, like creators, just everybody who comes together to kind of discuss, I would say promote, but it's almost become less promotion than it has been, like problem solving and, you know, discussion.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I found that to be a really interesting change. Like, I think in the past, as a marketer, I always viewed it as a chance to be in front of the most influential retailers. Now I see it as almost like a focus group. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm pitching you something, I can hear back the feedback. That's going to change how I pitch it to everybody else, as opposed to I'm making a sale.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I haven't been to other ones, but this year probably felt a little different because of the Diamond news. So there's like uncertainty. So you're also getting together to kind of discuss, well, what are the next steps? How are you handling this? How are you, you know, what are your plans? So that, I think that makes it a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah, I think this year it was a really strange dynamic. It's a unique experience this year because of that, and because we were having such a good year.
Yeah,
honestly, sales are up. Like they're legitimately at the highest they've been in 2 years, and as a result of that, and the sort of like looming, you know, threat of, will Diamond take down half the industry with it? Will tariffs take down the other half while things are so good? Like, there's a drama that
will
really
map action on Batman ruin that title?
I mean, that becomes obvious, I think, to me, right?
Yeah, a lot of questions. A lot of questions.
You legitimately, you had a lot of I mean, you and I both had a lot of stage time this year. I didn't even get all of yours. I didn't get a chance to watch all of yours. You were up there for I assume you were up there for Marvel. I must have missed that bit.
Briefly I went up to talk Captain America. I was on stage more than I thought I was going to be. It was just kind of like one of those like dumb things where like oh yeah, I guess I'm here, so I should go on stage because they're talking about my book. Like Distillery, I went on stage because they're talking about my book. Marvel did the same. DC, I didn't need to be on the stage for that one, but I thought it'd be funny.
That was funny
since I was leaving the title. And then ZCN, the presentation on that. So yeah, it was fair. I was worried people were gonna be absolutely fucking sick of me by the end because my presentation for ZCN was at the end.
Yeah.
Last day, right at the end of a lunch, I'm just like, oh, this is going to be death, but it works.
You closed it out so hard. I heard more positive feedback about that than anything else. In fact, we pulled down the recording, and I'm going to ask if the organization minds. I'd love to put it at the back end of this episode in case anybody is interested.
I was just looking at it because, you know, a friend of the show, Megan,
Megan Marsden.
She videotaped it. Like, it's funny because she presented me two versions. She's like, one is like the live stream version, which you can hear me clearer, but you hear no laughs. And then the other one, she's like, oh yeah, this one we won't use because, you know, you can barely hear you and all we hear is laughs. I'm like, no, we're gonna put the one with the laugh. I'm gonna put the one with laughs up 100%. I am uploading that this week for sure. Even if I had to go through and transcribe it all myself for the captions, like there's nothing worse than like seeing me say a joke and then this long pause and then I go in again. I'm just like, no.
I haven't actually watched them, but now I don't know. I think maybe you post the one with laughs from Megan's lap, and I'll post the one without the laughs where we can hear you. Because that was a great presentation. You did a great job. Maybe we can get somebody talented to edit them together. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should sync up.
Well, I can tell you, it was you did really a fantastic job, and I actually heard from 2 or 3 people that they saw you in the room all the time, like just taking it in. And I, you know, I said, yeah, I mean, that's he obviously loves the medium and loves the business, and is obviously curious about how things work,
Yeah.
which I think says a lot about, and it says a lot about how you've built a career. Is that curiosity is really kind of key.
Well, especially now, because like with you and me doing ZCN, like we are also dealing with distribution and printing and stuff. Like we're not, or I mean, I know you were before, but like for me, I'm like, oh, I need to know about this stuff because that's what we do. Like, I'm not just writing a thing anymore. I'm back in those kind of trenches.
Yeah, which is it's good. It's good to have you. It's good to have you in the foxhole.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really great. We're running in actually really light, and which means more people will probably actually watch and listen because they don't have to commit to 3 hours. Did anything we didn't cover that you would absolutely want to?
No, I mean, I think just kind of the future of ZCN, which is I'm excited about. I mean, because you came on board with this previous issue, and it's our highest circulation. We got tons of ads. Like, you did an amazing job, and like,
thank you.
We overprinted, overshipped. Like, I mean, it feels it's the strongest issue, I think, as a result of our teamwork on it, and the people who work for you. So that was great, and like, I think the fact that we're now, like, I've got the plans, basically the cover story plans for the rest of the year, and the fact that we're at 16 pages now, starting with issue 10, like that's gonna be the way it is. It just feels like a real thing, like a solid thing that shops can really get into and readers can get into, and I'm super excited about it.
We made 2 decisions this year when we were together, and I'm just going to say them out loud now so that it makes me get an announcement out. 16 pages throughout. Like you said it was 4, and it was 8, and then sometimes it was 4 again. And anyway, now it's 16 pages. And listen, I think sky's the limit.
Yeah.
How many pages was a Wizard back in the day? Like 128, something like that?
Oh, God.
Yeah, let's go there.
It'll have to involve more people, I think.
And we're gonna go up to 25 count bundles, meaning like up until when I came on, you had been doing 10 count bundles, and I think I think stores need more, frankly, and we're still gonna keep them as cheap as they are. They're 11 cents each for the stores, and could be free, could be $1, whatever for the fans. Let the store decide. So really thrilled to make that step. I think it's we're gonna really build something here very special.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for me, I see the sky as the limit for where we can.
I keep thinking. I mean, I don't think I've said this to you before, so maybe anyone commenting can say if it's a good idea or bad. I was thinking at the end of the first year we should put out like a for sale version, a collection of the first year of it.
Oh. I like that.
Like as it, because I think it will also be like, oh, when someone buys that and then they find out that it's going to be available for free in the monthly installments, like maybe that works.
So good. Oh, once again, I'm irritated. I didn't think of it. That's a good one.
Because mostly I think about it because like I have here, I just got issue 9, and I'm like, there's actually enough here to kind of put like a proper square bound little collection of the first 12 when that's done.
Well, we're getting close to the first 12.
We'll strip out the ads. If they want their ads in, they got to pay again, obviously.
Goddamn right. And you should. You absolutely should advertise in that annual collection. You need to update your ad, right? You freshen that up.
Yeah. Come on, everyone. Another way to give us money. I love it.
Well, I you know what? We should just record these kinds of things from now on, and then we'll just use it as content as the ideas come in. You know what else I'll also say is give us your questions, right? How about some questions for a letters column? Jim McLaughlin doing those letters columns in Wizard was one of my favorite features. I still think back on those. I would love to do something like that. So, and it will be curated. So any threats to chop off Chip's head will likely not make it to the magazine.
Yeah, there will be a step before it reaches me. Let's just say that. I will not be the first reader of these emails.
So it could be emails. It could be comments on the YouTube post of this.
Yep.
I'm going to leave that open. I'm going to say we'll take that as an opportunity for you to get your name in print. in ink on paper. I know.
Fancy.
Look
I
at
know.
that. Look at that. Chip, this has been too much fun, man. And I mean, not just this interview, but like working with you has been one of the highlights of my year. So
yeah,
I really
100%.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
awesome.
Can't agree more. Awesome.
All right, buddy. Well, and since you refuse social media, other than ZCN and your favorite comic book shop, which frankly, why is it not carrying it? Like legitimately, guys, you're investing like $1 a month in this. What's your problem?
Come on, man.
Come on.
You're making money off this thing. Trust me. Zdarsky.substack.com. That's it. That's the only place for little old me. Besides LinkedIn, obviously, because, you never know.
You never know. There might be money there. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Girk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.